On behalf of the 31,000 members of the National Society of the Sons of the American Revolution, I bring you greetings. All of us here today would likely regard the Battle of Point Pleasant as the first battle of the American Revolution. But I suppose most of you know that not everyone would agree with us. Many historians look upon Point Pleasant, which is also sometimes called the Battle of Kanawha, as a battle of Lord Dunmore's War. But I'm not sure that this distinction matters. Let's put this battle into some historical context and consider what are the issues associated with the Battle of Point Pleasant. This conflict can be confusing. There are many moving parts, so to speak, and it can be difficult to keep them straight. You might think this battle was just the British and the Americans on one side and the Indians on the other. But when you examine this conflict closer, you discover that the relationship between the British and the Americans was already strained, and that while the Anglo-Americans were fighting some Indians, other Indians just sat on the sidelines, either passively supporting the British or remaining neutral. The Battle of Point Pleasant was fought on October 10, 1774. Let's consider what else had been going on. 11 years earlier, King George III had issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763, forbidding American settlement and acquisition of land beyond the Appalachian Mountains. This proclamation probably contributed to the growing divide between Britain and her colonies. Even though the boundary where Americans could migrate and claim land was pushed westward in subsequent treaties, the British government refused to permit many new colonial settlements for fear of instigating war with Native Americans. And this angered colonial land speculators. So what culminated here was the result of Britain's effort to lay claim to the Ohio Valley and to extend its influence into Ohio and Kentucky. Britain sought to manage, really to control, Native Americans and the migration of Anglo-Americans. But did Britain seek to gain a firmer grasp on this land for the use and benefit of its subjects, American subjects? Did Britain seek to manage the Indians so as to protect its American subjects? Or was the British king more concerned about securing this land and clearing it of any inconveniences that might get in the way of his bestowing large grants of land to his favorites? Long before men took up arms to claim land and remove the Indians, the British Indian Department under Sir William Johnson negotiated with various tribes of Native Americans so that by the time of Lord Dunmore's War, the Shawnees were diplomatically isolated from other American Indians. British diplomacy was conducted without any coordination with Americans, nor was it conducted for the benefit of Americans, but for the benefit of the king and his favorites. Let's consider even further the historical context of the Battle of Point Pleasant. Only 1 month before, the First Continental Congress had met in Philadelphia. The Boston Tea Party had occurred only 10 months before, and the Boston Massacre was only 4 years earlier. Within the previous 10 years, the British Parliament had passed the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Coercive Acts. Tensions between the British and the Americans were high, and the relationship was becoming more strained every day. By October of 1774, the storm clouds of revolution had already begun to gather. Dunmore could hear the rumblings of rebellion. Many Virginians suspected that Dunmore had intentionally arrived late at Point Pleasant so as to isolate the Virginia militia under Andrew Lewis. Did Dunmore really want the Shawnees to destroy the Virginians before the British regulars arrived? Many Virginians would later wonder whether Dunmore had hoped to eliminate the militia so that if revolution took root here, he could crush it more easily. Only 6 months after the Battle of Point Pleasant, the shot heard round the world would be fired on Lexington Green. 14 months after Point Pleasant, Dunmore would be driven out of Virginia by some of the same militiamen who fought under him here. Before he was driven out of Virginia, Dunmore would court Native Americans to become British allies, including some of the same Indian tribes the Virginia militia had defeated here at Point Pleasant. Whether we regard the Battle of Point Pleasant as a battle of Lord Dunmore's War or as a battle of the American Revolution, what it seems to underscore is that British interests and American interests were not aligned, that they were becoming increasingly misaligned even at cross purposes, and that the gulf between Britain and its American subjects was becoming wider than the Atlantic Ocean. Today we honor the men who fought and died here. These men may not have thought that they were fighting for American independence, but they were certainly determined to accept nothing less than their own freedom. Thank you.